Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Fight with me, Mike.
I'm Zach.
This is The Fight.
Welcome to The Fight.
We'll get to it. So, we got a good deal going on now. We've got a huge wave of executive orders. We've got the new HR 127 was published. That's out. We got the GameStop story that everybody's hearing about. So, we got a decent amount to get into this week.
Yeah, and it's a very scary time to be a patriot in America.
It is. It is. Well, we still have the purge going on, and it's intensifying. I mean, and they're openly looking, and so, like, I've even seen where they're gonna be, like, the cop that died, they're gonna be charging people for that murder, even if they didn't enter the Capitol building, even if they were people just standing outside. They're saying they could still be liable now.
So now they're not only holding them accountable for something that they didn't even do, it's basically like guilty by association.
Right.
They're also labeling them domestic terrorists, putting them on no-flight lists, and so on and so forth. I mean, we've covered that before. But now they're going after everyday Americans and hindering not only their First Amendment like they've been doing, they're also hindering their Second Amendment even further, and a few other consequences.
There's going to be a huge wave of that coming. But now, so the purge not only continued, but it's getting worse and worse to where now your mainstream media is even saying, because they love what happened to Parler. They love how Amazon just flipped the off switch on those servers and essentially shut it down. You know what I mean? And we talked about that. How stupid do you have to be to, be on the right side and buy servers from Amazon and not have contingency plans and know what was going to happen? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know much about, running off servers or even, running a server or renting a server, but I can't imagine, it's got to be a lot of money to run a server or to own a server, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a server, from a company standpoint like Parler, who wasn't that big of a company to begin with, they were just trying to make that platform for our people. And they probably took advantage of the only way they could was to go off of a server from a place like Amazon, who's going to offer them lower rates to be on their server.
That's the problem though, is the business side of thing. Well, they loved that they were able to do that. So now what you're hearing mainstream media say is things like, we have to do something about the Fox News and the Newsmax and the Rush Limbaughs. These are all spreading these domestic terrorist extremist ideas. And then they say, well, they do have a First Amendment, freedom of speech, but that doesn't mean that cable companies and Comcast and Verizon and YouTube and these other places have to carry them and force that rhetoric into everybody's homes. I mean, if people want to go search out information on their own, that's fine, but why broadcast it into their homes, that dangerous rhetoric? So basically they're saying, Fox News, like, people can do whatever they want, but they shouldn't be allowed to use platforms to have an audience. They shouldn't be able to be carried on cable. They shouldn't be able to have shows on Netflix or their apps like Newsmax does. You know what I mean?
And I've actually gotten into a bit of a disagreement with somebody over the whole, Parler being shut down and our First Amendment when it comes to social media platforms. And their argument was, when you have a business, because that's how he looked at it, it's a business. When you have a business, you basically, that First Amendment's out the window. When his argument was the First Amendment applies only to the government. Like, the government can't hold you accountable for your voice and your actions. But because these are private businesses, they are allowed to do so. And I brought up the fact that, these platforms are our futuristic means of communication. People are no longer reading the news. We've touched on this before, so I don't want to be a dead horse or anything, but it's our way of communication now. That's our voice. at the end of the day, we have a right to say, we have a right to free speech. And that's what our forefathers wanted for us. And now that these platforms are our new ways of communicating and our new voice, they have to, you get what I'm saying? They have to move forward with our standards. It's
right.
our way of communicating.
You would think so, but instead we're seeing the exact opposite. Where if they don't agree with you, you're not allowed to use any of it.
And you're automatically an extremist.
But then they still say that they're maintaining freedom of speech. Like, yeah, he can say whatever he wants, just because we're not letting him use anything to say it. He can go out on his back porch and he can yell his opinions at the sky all he wants. You know what I mean? We're not going to throw him in jail for that.
Even if you go to places like China where they don't have free speech, you can go in your backyard, if you have a backyard, where no one can hear you and say whatever the hell you want. Even in your shower, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, as long as your neighbors don't hear you.
Exactly.
Because your neighbors will call the government and rat you in. And we're seeing that in America now.
But that's where I'm going with.
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
It doesn't matter what you're allowed to say in the privacy of your own home. It's what you're allowed to say to the world and be heard.
Right.
That's your
and not be persecuted
right.
for those beliefs.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing that now. All these red flag laws and everything. I mean, we'll get into that when we get into that topic a little later on. But to tie it in a little bit and tease it, those red flag laws are perfect for that. So now, you're having a barbecue with a couple buddies, have a couple of drinks, you know what I mean, and start voicing your opinion, you know what I mean, a little louder than maybe you normally would, and your neighbor overhears you. All they have to do is phone call. I don't know, man. This guy, I heard him in his backyard saying some pretty white right-wing shit. I don't know. I wouldn't trust him. I know he's got guns, too. Y'all might want to look into that. And then the next day...
No, you won't even hear that. No knock warrant.
Oh, right.
Just kick in the door and shoot your dog and arrest you.
Yeah.
For something you even do.
And even if... shoot you if necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So... But...
I saw a video where an older lady was talking, where the cops heard that she had a firearm in the house, so they knocked on her door and asked to see her firearms or where she stored them. And it probably would have been better if I would have had a reference for this. But anyways, she basically said when they asked her, "Do you have any firearms in the house?" She said, "Yes, I have an antique revolver in the back bedroom." And they asked her if she would go get the firearm for her. And she went back and brought it out to show the police officers. And all of a sudden, she had a bunch of guns pointing at her head and them yelling, "She's got a gun."
Mm-hmm.
After they asked her to go receive the phone.
Right.
If they were that concerned with it, why wouldn't they just walk back there with her?
Right.
If they have a warrant.
So yeah, we see freedom of speech, and then it ties into red flag laws. That ties into the freedom of speech. Red flag laws essentially tie into both the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. Especially when it comes to anybody that might have a gripe with you or not like you, be able to, just make a phone call and have that taken away from you. And a big ha-ha, that's funny for them, you know what I mean? Right. And it's very dangerous. And I think that, mainly it's not a forefront issue in people's mind, and they don't really stand against it, you know what I mean, in the numbers that we should, and with, at the level that we should. And I think that's mainly because it doesn't affect their everyday lives yet. Or they think, oh, well, that's just, the most radical of Trump supporters, or that's just these people, or that's just those people, or yeah, they fucked up, they shouldn't have done that, and you know what I mean? It's going to affect you eventually. It's going to come to you. It's going to be your door. You know what I mean?
It's almost like they're trying to tear this country apart. I mean, whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? Whatever happened to free speech? Whatever happened to the right to own bear arms?
I think what happened to it, and really I think that it's the number one problem that we face as a country. This is why, some days feel almost hopeless, where you're like, nobody's ever going to fight back against any of this shit. When you have them days when you're really just doubting the future of our society and as a whole, you know what I mean? Where people aren't united anymore. People don't, you hardly know your neighbors if you know them at all. Nobody's willing to stick their neck out or go out online for somebody that's not them, because the last 20, 30 years of society has done that to us, where we took both parents out of the home, made them both have to work, have to have two paychecks just to keep the home going with everything and pay the bills, you know what I mean? So now both parents are out of the home all day. You got the school systems raising the kids and all that, but the bigger picture of what's going on there is that was a bad loss, but also it's making it to where people got more and more busy and hyper focused on just preserving themselves, on just getting themselves through each day on a day-to-day basis, and getting through each week, living paycheck to paycheck. You know what I mean? They don't have time to go to school PTA meetings and argue about the curriculum that the school is actually doing. They don't have time to worry about, 2-second news glimpse they hear about some guy getting arrested for saying something. They don't, you know what I mean? Everybody is so busy on just themselves, on just surviving, getting day to day, and maybe acquiring some nice shit that you like. You know what I mean? That it's the classic divide and conquer. And we've been divided and we've been conquered. To where now nobody is going to fight back against something that isn't a direct, in the moment threat to them. You know what I mean?
At which point it's too late.
Right, but the whole point of this country is that the power was granted to we the people. We ultimately, as a collective, all hold more power than the government ever will, just with our First and Second Amendment and with our numbers alone. You know what I mean? And they're supposed to be our representatives, and, but we don't hold the power because we're not all a collective now. Now we're all just individuals, just focus on ourselves and getting ourselves through the day. You know what I mean? So it really makes me wonder, unless really we can overcome that, I mean, where do we go from there? How do we overcome the tyranny that we're starting to see with...
I think you're going to start to see people, this could be wishful thinking, but come together. In a sense, like we've been saying in all our videos, get out, get involved with your community, get involved with your local politics, come together as a group. And I think for the most part you're seeing something, maybe not the involvement with the politics yet, hopefully that will come sooner, but more so the involvement with the communities. And I know if you go to some of these like smaller towns in the northern parts of, wherever, like for us it'd be more towards like, let's say like, north of here, towards Adirondacks and that, the smaller close communities, though those people all know each other. They watch each other's properties, they watch out for each other, if someone's on vacation, they're watching each other's on the lawn and stuff like that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And those are communities that are going to come together first, I think.
Right.
And then hopefully that just starts spreading.
Well, really, you could even argue that those real rural communities, those small towns, are the last places that haven't been divided yet. They're the only place where you can still go and see where everybody knows everybody's name and everybody knows where everybody lives, and like you said, watch each other's shit. Like we have a camp up north, upstate New York. You've seen it up there, that small town atmosphere. You see it in places in PA where we go, where we have relatives and stuff. Have those small town vibes. You can still see it there. And that's why those places will always be the hardest for the government to penetrate. You know what I mean? And that's why you see a lot of times that's all red territory, you know what I mean? Because those are people that still believe in those freedoms and your Second Amendment and, so really try to get back to as close to that as possible. Or just build your networks and community. Now everything's online.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's all screen names and...
It's hard to even do that because they're censoring that. It's a business. You don't have a First Amendment there. You can't talk to buddies there because the second you say something that's a little bit, you know what I mean? Let's look at like some people. Let's say you have a drink or two that night, right? And maybe you become a little confused. You become angry at what you're confused about. You know what I mean? Maybe you say the wrong thing. Maybe you don't mean anything serious by it, but maybe you say the wrong thing. And then all of a sudden, on like places like social media, you're painted as a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're blacklisted and you're shadow banned and you're no longer allowed to be a part of the community.
Right.
Whereas if you talk in person and get to know each other on a personal level, your neighbors, your community, it's a little bit different. They could be like, hey, I've known that guy for a while now. He's not, this is what he meant by it. He didn't mean anything bad by it, you know what I mean? Because sometimes people do say the wrong
But things are always so dramatically taken out of context. But once you take something, once you put something into text and it loses all of that body language and probably, plus the part they hacked off that came before and the part they hacked off that came after, they just take that little snippet and they say, look at these words that he said. And you're like, oh my God. You know what I mean?
Oh, terrible guy.
Right. But, first of all, yeah, like you were saying, whatever happened to... How often do people say shit that they don't mean? Or shit that they don't know what they're talking about? Mm-hmm. Especially when you're trying to just joke around or you're having a couple drinks with buddies or shit like that. Mm-hmm. Or just all the time, just because you say something or you make a joke. That's what comedy is dramatizing things, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So, but you take that joke out of context to where now it looks like a serious statement. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just ridiculous. But I think the bigger point that I'm trying to say is that we've lost that in this country, and we've lost where people, we've lost just that unity to where neighbors won't stick up for each other anymore. You don't know each other, you don't like each other, and plus everything's also mingled. So, we live in New York, so we're in like a sea of blue. We're just two red dots.
Well, luckily, we're not the only ones out here.
So we wouldn't, you know what I mean? Of course we're not gonna, get along with most of our neighbors probably, but...
There are definitely some people who are on our side around here. They're definitely far and in between. You know what I mean? It's not like they're right there, but there's a little bit of a community here. But speaking of losing things, if we don't get control and people don't reach out to representatives and we don't do something about it, we're gonna lose our right to own guns with this HR 127 bill.
This HR 127 bill is
a crock of shit.
It's literal Armageddon for the Second Amendment. It will tax and fee and regulate and ban the Second Amendment pretty much into non-existence.
I reached out to my representative this morning, actually. It took me a little bit because I'll admit I've never had to reach out to a representative for anything before. I mean, obviously I've had my opinions on things, and sometimes when you go online you'll see like these petitions like, hey, put your email in and electronically sign this petition, say you're against this, and I've done those things, but I haven't seen anything like that for this bill. So I did some research and found out how to come in contact with my representative. Whether it helps or not, I don't know, but I'm going to try anything I can, you know what I mean? You got to fight somehow, some way. And I reached out to my representative, and I made my points that I hope that my representative who got my vote, hoping that they do what they're supposed to do, right? Which is stand up for our rights and represent what we the people want. And I know a majority of we the people want the right to defend ourselves, protect ourselves, put food on the dinner table. And I'm not going to go into details of what I said, but basically telling them that they need to do what they're there to do. It's imperative that, we stop this bill from being passed, because it's going to hurt. Who it's really going to hurt is the people who are living paycheck to paycheck, the people who aren't on top of the world financially. Because you're looking at an $800 minimum for a license to own a firearm, plus registration fees, because you know that's not going to be free. And there's no grandfather clause to say, oh, we own these guns, we're not worried about these guns anymore. So that means you still have to register every single gun you have, and you have to go through that whole process. Even if you've been a gun owner for 30 years, guess what? You still got to go pay to have training, 24-hour training. And some of these training courses are expensive. Now, I don't know if they're going to be that level of training. It might be like a basic hunter safety course or some sort of course like that, where it might only cost like $20-$30, but it's the government, you know. They're still you know, I mean, you add that to the registration fees, to the $800 licensing fee, to the fee to pay a psychologist to do a psychological evaluation,
and everything that we already pay.
Yeah, on top of everything else we already pay tax wise, it's really going to hinder the people who can't really afford that. And what if you're a guy who, let's say, is not really that into guns, but you just or female, sorry, but say you're a person who's just not that into guns, but you want something to defend yourself with, or even had a gun handed down to you that was like your great grandfather's. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You still have to go through all that process just to keep that firearm. But what if you don't shoot the gun? What if you're not into guns? You just have it for sentimental reasons and collective reasons because it was my great grandfather's gun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now it's either I'm going to pay all this money just to keep my great-grandfather's gun, or I'm going to have to give it up. What if you're a person who, because of COVID, just lost your job and your livelihood and have nothing but that gun and the clothes on your back? Now you're giving up the only thing you had that represented who your family was because you can't afford to keep it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, exactly. A lot of times, you know, rifles, shotguns, or any kind of firearm, pistols. A lot of times there may be some that are like family heirlooms in some family. You know what I mean? They got passed down from grandfather to father to son to, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you were talking about. And one of the important parts of this bill that we've seen is not only is it going to require mandatory licensing, you know what I mean? But it's going to require mandatory licensing for each different class of weapons. So like you were saying, so if you have an AR style weapon, well, you have to go get the license for that. I forget what the terminology they used in the
military type weapons.
Right, yeah, military type weapons. And that's a mandatory $800 fee to get that. Now, your 30-06s and your grandfather's old rifles and stuff you have, different category. There's another mandatory license you have to get with another mandatory $800 fee. So now you're $1,600 in, and you haven't even gotten to your pistols, muzzle loaders, or other types yet.
And here's the thing too, like just to add to the burden it's going to put on you financially, right? Let's say you live in what I would call right now a so-called freedom state, right? So I live in New York. If I was to go out and buy an AR or something like that, it would already have to be butchered. It would have to have a welded magazine release so that the magazine cannot be removed whatsoever. It has to be 100% permanent, right? Which makes me not even want to own one of those things.
Right.
But let's say you're in what I call a freedom state where you're allowed to have an AR as it was intended to be used. You now not only have to pay for all that licensing, all that training, you also have to go pay a gunsmith to permanently weld your magazine release.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more money. And who knows what those gunsmiths are going to charge you? They're like, well, parts, you can't do this, you gotta change this up, you know what I mean? And plus the welding fee, you're probably looking at $200 just to have something welded like that.
Right. And that goes exactly to a point that we were talking about before, where I was talking about how, you know, yeah, sure, they don't just ban the outright gun. What they've been doing is they've been attacking the attachments and the features and this and that and all, and attacking all of the outside stuff until what you're left with is garbage. And we have that here in New York, like you were just talking about. That's a perfect example. We love our welded 10-round ARs that we can have, and then have to break in half to reload our 10 rounds one at a time.
They do make those speed loaders that go through the ejection point.
But really, at the end of the day, that's what you have is a AR that is useless and not at all an actual AR. You know what I mean?
And I feel like I have to clarify too. When I brought that up about the features, because the bill states that.
Well, you can get the feature list. Yeah.
No. It says any rifle that can accept a magazine larger than 10 rounds. They made magazines.
Oh, you're talking about the new 127. Yeah. That's one of the new things. Yeah. I was talking about our current laws and how we have the well, because we were talking about that. But yes, that's
I'm talking about 127. So with the new law, it cannot accept the magazine. Be able. Let me back up. It cannot be able to accept a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. Which means it can't exist because there's already millions of magazines that hold over 10 rounds. Right. Which means at some point in time, you would be able to access a magazine that holds over 10 rounds if you've already had them for years or whatever, if you're in a freedom state. Then it's void. You can't have that gun. Not only can you not have magazines, you can't have that gun.
Listen, any gun that can accept a magazine can then accept a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds.
Yeah.
So in essence, every single weapon that can accept
illegal.
a magazine is illegal.
Yep.
But they worded it to sound like, oh, well, so if you make them so that they can't accept... magazines come to one standard. They just fit in the length and the style is, you know what I mean? And then you have your drum types and you have your regular magazines, but... Because they say that, can't accept a magazine or a drum, blah, blah, blah. And they even go so far as to say, or any other man-made device, basically saying even if you fabricate your own shit.
Mm-hmm. So basically, it's like if you have a weapon that can accept a magazine, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah. And that even goes for little ass 22s.
Oh, wait. If it's a tube-fed 22, not magazine-fed, if it's a tube-fed 22, it can hold more than 10 rounds. That's the only exception. It has to be 22 caliber, and it has to be tube-fed. Tube-fed ARs, guys. That's what we need. Tube-fed ARs. It said 22 caliber. AR 5.56 is a 22 caliber.
Well, yeah, but it still wouldn't fit in the tube because the 223 5.56 it's bottlenecked. So you're actually getting that bigger bang.
Hang on. If anybody out there builds guns or is a designer for guns, hear me out, alright? So, we have it's called a Keltec RG7, I think it is, or RG something. Anyways, it's a tube-fed shotgun that has dual tubes on it that alternates the tubes as it feeds. Now, if you had an AR that was tube-fed and it had dual tubes on it, it could hold 20 rounds. If you had each tube held 10 rounds and alternate the tubes and it would feed. Then you had a 20 round tube fed AR, and according to this law, it would be legal because it's tube fed and it's 22 caliber.
That sounds like a road I don't want to go down.
I don't know. Nobody wants to go down.
I think we just need to trash this bill.
Yeah, we do.
But like you were saying, you contacted your representative. Went through a lot of time, your own personal time, finding their number or email or a way to get a hold of them. Now, what we know is that a lot of times they're going to make it so that you can't get directly in contact with a representative. You know what I mean? You'll get a voicemail or you send an email that just goes off in the ethos and you hate for a reply. And if you get a reply, it's probably going to be, like a generic secretary reply, you know what I mean? Like, we've seen your email and we're taking it into consideration, which they could send you whether they actually read it or not, because it's just generic, basic. It doesn't even talk about anything you actually talked about, or, you know what I mean? Just, we've received it, thank you, we'll take it into account. But, like you said, you're doing something. You're trying that avenue. They tell you that you should get in touch with your representative, that you should voice your opinions, that you should participate in your government, and that's what you're doing. Even if it ends up not doing anything. At least you try. And I think that needs to be more of the spirit going forward. I think that, you know, we're all busy just trying to get through the day to day and all that. Everybody's busy. Everybody can say they're busy. But if you just try to and work all avenues at once, you know what I mean? So try to talk to your representative at the same time as staying in contact with your groups and your you know what I mean, your network of people. Maybe start trying to look for possible protest dates and locations if it comes to that. Future planning, you know what I mean? So right now we're trying to get a hold of our representatives. If that doesn't go anywhere, when it comes time for the bill to be actually passed, you know what I mean? What could we have organized as far as protests? And this is a federal bill, so we're talking federal protests. Now that's where it's going to get tricky because it's always been okay. It costs money, you know what I mean, to travel and protest and do all that, and it always did. That's why, you know, not everybody can go, but for the ones that can, or you support activists and people who can go, you know what I mean, then now we have that domestic terrorism label to where they've already basically made it clear where if we protest, they're going to take it as a direct threat. So now just the act of peacefully protesting is going to be dangerous, and you're going to be having to maybe accept consequences that you normally wouldn't for peaceful protesting. Like you might get arrested, you know what I mean? They might try to charge you with something for standing there and holding a flag and saying what you're doing is wrong.
I'll stand in jail and hold a flag. America. That's what it's all about.
But it's getting to that point where it's going to be difficult decisions, and we're going to have to try to attack it from all directions. And we haven't even covered not even half of what's in this bill. You know, what we talked about is just two basic parts. I would encourage everybody to do their own research on HR 127. Look it up for yourself. See all the details. You know, I always promote Guns and Gadgets. That's a good site you can check. That's where I get my information. But look it up for yourself. See everything that's in there. We're just talking about a couple parts. There is a lot in here. There is a lot of fees. There's a lot of restrictions. There's a lot of bans. And it affects the wide spectrum. And if you remember from before when we were talking about this subject, we talked about HR 127 and like 5 or 6 other bills back when they got pre-filed, right? So now 127 has been published. But don't forget, there's still that other 5 or 6 bills that's going to be published or showing up again anytime soon, coming right behind it. And anything that HR 127 left out, they'll be sure to mop up.
Yeah. And they put a ban on 50 caliber, so all you muzzleloader hunters, you're done.
Yeah.
I think they meant to ban 50 BMG, but we'll keep that a little secret. Actually, no, that does ban 50 BMG, doesn't it? Because I think it says 50 cal or larger.
Yeah, 50 cal or larger, which would even illegalize some shotguns. Like I had a Remington 870, fully rifled, that shot rifled 50 cal slugs, the Sabbath slugs. That, you know, anybody that has them knows, because it's, you know, $3 a bullet for those. You pay like $15-$16 for a box of 5.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's a 50 caliber slug. It would be illegal. So even some shotguns wouldn't be safe. Some pistols. What about your Desert Eagles? Your 5.0s?
This is what we do. We all get together in all of our boats and go out in mass, have a mass
oh man,
event.
I tell you, you know, well, I told you about that bad accident I had over the summer when we were out on the bay. Oh my god, man, fucking pier came out of nowhere. Fucking lost all my guns, lost all my shit. Man,
all you're trying to do is
right. And now I got all these new bills, so I probably can't even get no new ones. But it's a darn tragedy. If ever you're gonna be going out on the boat and maybe you have your firearms with you, I don't know.
Well, I they're gonna want us to start attaching flotation devices to their firearms.
Well, that's what a smart guy would do. A smart guy. Unfortunately, I didn't do that with mine. I lost mine. But hopefully we'll beat these bills and I'll be able to get some more in the future.
Hopefully. I mean, it doesn't help that now, I think it was as of December, the whole form for when you purchase a firearm, that form you fill out. So the way it would work before was as a gun was sold to you, you'd fill out that form, they would do your background check, and then you would get a receipt, and then the gun shop for their records would keep a copy of that receipt. They would keep the form you filled out in a 2-part page, right? So on the front page, it would have your information as far as your name, your phone number, all that. But any guns you purchased for your background check and all that would be on the second page. So even if officers go there for any reason, if they find a gun that was at a crime scene, right? So they're trying to backtrace it. They would have to find out from the manufacturer which gun shop they sent that gun to, and then go from there to the gun shop and say, all right, we got this serial number for and make a model of this gun. We need to know who you sold it to. So the gun shop would be able to then look it up through their records, and all they would be able to show those officers is that form with your information, but they couldn't see the guns that were purchased on the second page. All they could say is, this is the person who bought it, here's their contact information, have a nice day.
Right.
Now with the new law, I believe as of December, if I understand correctly, now it's all on one page basically. So everything you're buying on top of your information is on that one form. So when they go in there and they see that, they see everything you now own, which is like a registry almost. I mean, they don't have any trace unless they find it at a crime scene. But it's just if there was a raid at the gun shop.
Right.
Like they were raiding some, the Palmer 80. They were doing raids there at their shop because they were illegally selling firearms. They were just 80% lowers. But then upon going through their raid, they took the receipts from all the sales that company made and went out to all those addresses where they shipped those Palmer 80 lowers and raided those people's houses and took their firearms for being illegal gun owners. Mm-hmm. So who's to say there's not going to be a raid at a gun shop like, hey, we gotta come here for whatever reason, and now we're looking at all the files that you've got. And then they go after those people.
Well, they can do whatever they want. Everybody knows, that all it takes for an officer to get a warrant is ask for one. You know what I mean? They are never denied a warrant. It's the good old boy system. They all know each other. They're all friends. This notion that judges are anything other than just normal people. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, I cannot give. You know what I mean? Oh hey Tom, how you doing? Oh, what's going on, Dave? You know what I mean? Oh, you're. Hey, how's the kids doing? How's this? Hey, it's going good, man. Look, we got these dirt bags. We got to check them out. I think maybe something's going on there. You mind if I get a warrant? Think of something maybe official you can put on there, make it sound good. He's like, don't even worry about it, man. I'll have something for you by noon. All right, thanks. And then 12:30 they at your house.
Yeah.
So and that's where I try to get people out of the hero worship that you see. You know what I mean? It is great. Anybody that serves or helps protect their community or has served in the military, you know what I mean? But that doesn't automatically mean that they are saints and only have the best interest of everybody at heart. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that they're no longer human and are no longer flawed. You know what I mean?
There's always going to be a bad bunch in the group.
People are people. Yeah, no matter what group of anything you get, there's going to be whack jobs, nutcases, and...
Hitler's soldiers were just people.
Right. So I don't know, because they get us a lot with that. You know what I mean? And almost to the point where it's like a sales gimmick now. You know what I mean? Like all you have to do is start up something, and it's veteran owned, and they like America, and you'd be like, whoa, let me buy all that. You know what I mean? Start putting the banners up all over your house, just product placement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you find out that they actually donate to Democrats and
Oh no.
aren't for the Second Amendment. That happens not only with our elected officials, but our businesses that we like. Like, if you're a conservative, you've had everybody you've ever voted for or bought something from stab you in the back. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's like they're fucking toying with us. You know what I mean? They just say things, and then we're like, oh, maybe this person's doing the right thing. You know what I mean? So you back them, and then you find out 6 months later, nope, or when the time really comes. You just get taken for a ride, but I don't know. I know we're all over the place today, though.
I think that's why it's important everybody reads the Constitution and knows what the hell's going on around them.
Exactly.
I think it's important to know your rights as an American.
Well, they always talk about, you hear that all the time. This is constitutional, this is unconstitutional. What about the Constitution? You always hear about the Constitution. You know what I mean?
If you don't study it, you don't know if what they're feeding is bullshit or not.
Right. Not only that, but the Constitution, like any document, can be really interpreted any way that the person wants to interpret it. You know what I mean? They even have a class of ruling in the courts for that. I forget what they call it, but basically sometimes they'll look at it and they'll take it exactly as it's written, and they won't go outside them lines. Other times, and I forget what they call it, but they'll basically say, well, we'll rule based on what we think they were trying to say if it related to today's society. You know what I mean? Where basically...
So anything to do with the Second Amendment?
Right. Well, they just wanted everybody to have muskets. But I will say one part that's not the Constitution, but is actually the Declaration of Independence that I like, and that I really think people should keep in mind going forward, is this little part right here. And excuse me if I butcher this, but I don't have this committed to memory. But it says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And what I've always liked about that part is, especially that one part where they say, and actually history has shown that people will suffer with tyranny. They will suffer with bad government. You know what I mean? As long as they can bear to, just to get by. And because, that people don't think that you should just change, a government that you've had, a system that you've had in place for 200 years or for thousands of years, depending on what part of the world you live in or whatever. But basically they're saying, it's been this way for a long time, and, people don't just change it willy-nilly for nothing. You know what I mean? So actually, what we've seen throughout history is that people are willing to suffer under bad rulers and tyranny for as long as possible until it gets so bad that they don't have any other choice. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what we see. You know what I mean? Over certainly our lifetimes, last 20, 30 years, we've seen things gradually get worse, but it's really kicked off since 2000. Since 2000, we've had the Patriot Act, the New York Safe Act, this act, that act, everything that's subsequently come, and now the last 4 years it's sped up with the First Amendment, and a lot of people, you just keep going to work every day. You just keep trying to get through the day, trying to get through the week, and at what point, you know what I mean, does the valve switch? You know what I mean? Where you're like, all right, we gotta do something here.
And I really, really hate when people say that there's no way a bill like H127, HR 127 will pass.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, why won't it pass? And their answer is because there's too many people with pro guns, too many people on their side. I'm like, okay, where were these people in the '80s when they had the first the ban on automatic weapons? Where were they on? There was an excuse for why they had to ban that. Then the '94 assault weapon ban. Well, there was an excuse for why we don't need these weapons. And then what was it, 2003 during the Patriot Act, or 2002 during the Patriot Act? There was an excuse for why that had to happen. Then you look at 2013 during the whole Safe Act in New York City. Where were people to help us during that? You know what I mean? So if they weren't there to stop any of those actions, why is it any different now? Why are they going to stop this stuff now? The NRA already went bankrupt. They're like, after this we out.
Yeah.
We don't want to have to pay anybody. We don't want to have to do anything we said we would do. You know what I mean?
Well, let's be honest. The NRA has never really been a strong defender of the Second Amendment.
Oh, they defended their money, all right?
Yeah. Well, they're real good at taking money, and they're real good at saying things that sound good. But, you know what I mean? The long list of things you just named off, where were they? You know what I mean? Were they doing anything effective? No. Have they ever really tried to make a big stand? No. And that's why, you see them getting attacked now for their executives basically being corrupt and taking all of the profits and living this glamorous lifestyle while not doing anything with the business. And to try to get out of that now, the NRA is filing bankruptcy, which they may actually be bankrupt with how much they're being, sued for and charged and all that. But you don't hear a lot of people in uproar about it. You don't hear a lot of people pissed off about the NRA being attacked, you know what I mean? Because where were they? You know what I mean? Yeah. So people don't have that bond or that emotional connection with it. It was just another thing that let them down, you know what I mean? I was a member for how many years, and all I got was this bumper sticker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I just don't want people to let this go and think that there's no possible way for it to pass. You need to reach your representatives.
Right.
Just like that Constitution, just like the Declaration of Independence said, like you were saying, you can only take so much bullshit for so long before you have to do something about it. Well, this gun control, they've been slowly chiseling away at it for years, since the 80s. It's time. It's past due. We need to do something about it. Contact representatives. Fight back. That doesn't mean go on some shooting spree or, you know what I mean? I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, we have legal avenues. We have not only a constitutional right to do this stuff, we have a obligation for the future of all Americans.
Right.
To do this.
Yeah. Be willing to stand up. Be willing to, actually speak truth to power. You know what I mean? Be willing to be willing to accept those consequences. You know what I mean? That they will come after you. They will try to persecute you. They are trying to shut it down with a vengeance.
Man, look.
But that just means that you need to. That just means even more so you need to be there protesting against it or standing against it. You know what I mean? Everything. We're at this tipping point now where we could literally lose everything in the next 5 years. No problem. You know what I mean? Look at what they've already done. Look at what they've done with a week of having power. You know what I mean? How many people have lost their jobs? How many people, you know what I mean? And now they're ruining women's sports with that transgender bullshit, with letting the transgender males play female sports. So they're just running over all the female athletes. You know what I mean? Smashing all their records. It's sad. You know what I mean? And you have a ton of women now in those women's sports trying to stand up and speak out against it, and they just get shut down. You know what I mean? And told to shut up and be more sensitive and check their privilege. You know, but it's insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a lot to take in. We need to.
It is.
We need to go about this clearly. You know, have a good mindset. Try to stay as positive as you can. Stay in the fight as long as you can. Don't give up. Stay motivated. Keep your head up. You know, and keep your head on a swivel. Do it. You know, like we were talking about our previous videos. Prepare. Get yourself for everything that's coming, but at the same time, be proactive in preventing all the chaos from coming.
Well, like you were saying, you know, use those avenues. Get a hold of your elected officials, even if it's in vain, even if it's not going to do you any good. Use every avenue that you can. Do that. You know, look for your groups, look for planned protests that you can join. Or if you can't personally do that, you know, maybe help fund or support someone who can go do that. Aside from that, get prepared for any contingencies, you know what I mean? Which is always a good idea anyway. You don't know what natural disasters could happen, or, you know what I mean? So just get prepared for anything like that. And, you know, also stay vigilant, trying to keep up with everything that's going on, know what's happening. And right here is going to be a good place to do that.
Yep.
So, you know, because like we talked about, a lot of people are so busy. You know what I mean? And that's what we will try to do going forward is, you know, be a place where at least you can come for an hour or less each week and know what's happening in the government and know what's going on, and also just get some realistic perspectives and opinions on things, you know, because we don't have that radio speak or TV speak, or, you know, we're just regular guys saying how we really feel.
Yep. And hopefully we'll get to some more content soon in the future. You guys some more stuff.
So good things coming for the channel. Stay tuned. As always, please take a second, give the video a like, maybe give the channel a subscribe, check us out.
Share it with your friends.
Share it with your friends, like-minded people you think might enjoy. And just stay with it till next time. We'll see you next week.